This is She's a Killer by Kirsten McDougall. So this one's set in a near future New Zealand where wealthy immigrants are creating chaos as they flee climate change, generally driving up food prices, illegally buying land, and creating a huge divide between the have and have-nots. In this environment, Alice, a 30-year-old woman just one IQ point short of genius and who is generally an underachiever in life, finds that her childhood imaginary friend has returned. In a chain of events, she's thrown together with Erika, a 15-year-old immigrant who draws Alice into her mysterious plans. So Kirsten McDougall has won a few awards and been shortlisted and longlisted in a few things in recognition of her writing in New Zealand. And she wrote a well-received dark novella called Tess. So she's making a name for herself. I think this is her first full-length novel. So She's a Killer is hard to define as far as genre. So it is set in a dystopian near future, but it's the very near future where people are fleeing climate change and there's a lot of corruption and hopelessness. It's darkly funny sometimes and not taking itself too seriously or trying to have too much of a message. Or any message, but it's got a thriller plot some of the time. So it's a little weird. There's a few little weird things that happen in it. And so it's kind of hard to tie down in the sense of genre. It's a little bit satire. It's a little bit dystopian future, but it's a little bit thriller, but never fully leans into any of those things. And I guess perhaps the best definition of it is that it's a character study. So Alice is our lead character, and at one point in the book, it's discussed that she's most likely a sociopath. While she's quite entertaining and often funny to read about, she would be pretty awful to know in real life. She's kind of horrible. She's passive-aggressive, manipulative. She can be a real bully sometimes. She has little to no empathy. She's obsessed with her IQ points. And to me, she really didn't strike me as being that far above average intelligence as I was reading it. I was like, I'm not really seeing a lot of traits of a smart person here, or an intelligent person. She has no self-awareness. She's spiteful and vengeful. She does not care how she impacts others, and she lives in almost squalor. She has given up on trying, whether that's having a meaningful life, taking care of herself, having friendships, making new friends, or having any kind of relationships, or even she's given up on surviving the changing world around her. She's just given up. So with her imaginary friend and her strange relationship with her mother, so her imaginary friend from childhood has sort of randomly come back, and that's a through line of the story. And her mother lives in the same house, but they only interact via Morse code. So there's sort of an implication that if she's not a sociopath, she could actually just be struggling to process the world and be sort of overwhelmed and maybe have some mental health issues. But we never get a definitive answer on that either way. But yeah, she's basically a bit of a sad sack and she's her own worst enemy. As a character in a book, she's kind of awesome to read about because she's so complex and you kind of don't really know what she's going to do next. And sometimes she kind of shocks you with some of the stuff that she does or things she has done. So yeah, the book is often quite funny in a very dark and cynical way. It makes fun of the corporate world and of people who are upbeat and oblivious and of people who are naively planning on surviving the coming end of the world and just of everything really, society in general, people who drink oat milk, whatever. It reminded me of this sort of smart slacker type humor from the 90s. Like an attitude of being too smart and seeing through the thin veneer of everything. But also that's a coping mechanism. If you never really try anything, you can never fail at anything. So, it's brilliantly written. And I really liked that even though it's kind of topical with some of the things that it's talking about and the things that happen, it's not really being earnest or trying to be edgy. So it's not going to date as badly as other books that are coming out about the current world and climate change and things that are happening. So I respect that. I do think dystopian futures were more fun in the past. I mean that in a very like generalizing kind of way, but I feel like, you know, books and movies about dystopian future scenarios were often kind of stylish, and they were sort of cynical and edgy, but in a film noir kind of way. And reading a dystopian future now in the current, you know, life and news cycle and whatever, a dystopian future now feels relentlessly dark and a little bit too real. So because of that, I didn't always enjoy reading this book, even though it was startlingly different to what I often get my hands on. And because of that, I actually do recommend it, but it is a little bit bleak to read about in my personal taste or personal opinion. Yeah, and I think the book doesn't really have a message, which doesn't help. The plotting really revolves around moving through Alice's world as seen through her eyes. So there's lots of little digressions where you just sort of, you're with her and you're wondering what she's going to do. She's at work. What is she going to do? Or at a coffee shop, or she's sort of following someone, or I don't know. We meet characters. We hear her thoughts on them. It's not boring. And I mean, it's always interesting, but it's not really like a plot that's trying to make a point or make sense of climate change or anything. Yeah, I mean, it brings up climate change, immigration, rising food prices, the end of the world as we know it, the corporate environment. So all of these things are introduced as ideas, but they're not really, there's no message about them. There's no point that the author is trying to make about them. There's no answers to the questions that are sort of posed by bringing those things up. We also don't meet Erika until about halfway through the book, or a little bit past halfway, and we don't really know much about her until even later than that. And so when you're sort of trying to describe the plot of this book, that's a pivotal relationship in the book in a way, but it doesn't happen until about halfway in. Yeah, and the thriller aspects of the book come from outside our lead, and they're sort of imposed on her, and they don't enter until late in the game. And then they are, I'm trying not to give too much away here. They just kind of go their own way. Alice is a player in them, but she's not really a player in them. She's sort of drawn into it unwittingly. And I mean, essentially, it's a character study, but Alice is not that different at the end of the book than she was at the beginning, which I think is kind of the point. That's how Alice is. And it's kind of funny because most of the time in a character study, we're looking at, you know, well, I think in most books, really, you have a character at the beginning and they have a problem and they go through something and they change and they're different at the end. And I mean, you could argue that Alice really doesn't change at all. So yeah, I mean, it's, as you're reading it, it's funny. I mean, I found it very funny. It's dark though. But it just feels a little bit incohesive sometimes, or you wonder sort of what is the point of the book? And I mean, not every book has to have a strong message or a strong theme or even character growth, but all of those things make up the elements of a story at its most basic. And it feels like missing all of those things, not even picking one of them, kind of makes the whole thing a bit soft in a way. You kind of come to the end of it and you're like, oh, I enjoyed reading that, but it wasn't really about anything. I mean, I saw a couple of people on Goodreads said that you could probably just cut a lot out of it. And I mean, I guess you could, you know, it's that kind of a book. Yeah, so I think this one might be an acquired taste. I found it dark and cynical in a way that was very entertaining for me. And the author's grasp of character was excellent. I love that it was a bit weird. There's a couple of things in it where I was like, that's weird, that's different. So I actually do recommend it. I liked it. It was a little bit depressing because of the some of the things in it, but yeah, it's just not that strongly plotted. So yeah, it's it's a fresh voice out of New Zealand with a witty mind and a dark sense of humor. There's some absolutely excellent writing here. So though it might not please all readers, I really look forward to seeing what else this author is going to do, what she's going to do next. And if you kind of like something a little dark and a little bit different, then get your hands on this one. And yeah, thank you to PGC Books for the copy of this one for review. You can check out some of my other videos. I also have another channel and socials, so you can find links below if you want more of that. And if you want to hang out again, remember to like and subscribe. And you can always leave a comment, let me know what you thought, or let me know what else you might want to see. Thank you.